If you don't care about your education, if you don't care about your future, if you don't care about your career, and if you don't want to improve yourself, don't watch this video, because this video is not for you. However, if you want to be the best in your career, when it comes to the language, when it comes to the accuracy of your language, if you want to be one of the best in your writing, when it comes to the punctuation, this is the right video to watch. If you want to do your best in your SAT, this is the right video to watch. If you want to impress your teacher with your excellent writing, this is the right video to watch. So, let's get started. This is a great video to watch before taking your SAT. So if you want to revise for the grammar, or if you want to improve your grammar, this is a great video, I promise. So you will learn a lot. So my suggestion would be just watching this video as many times as possible. Pause it, watch it, take notes. In that case, you can improve your grammar and you can make it perfect. Alright, first, let's go over the content. I'm going to tell you what you will learn in this video. And make sure that you have your notebook so you can just take notes. First, I'll go over parts of speech, so you know what noun is, verb is, and so on. And after that, basic sentence parts, phrases and clauses, effective sentences, verb usage, about some verb tenses, pronoun usage, different pronouns, agreement, subject-verb agreement, when you write your essay and so on, and using modifiers, and some problems in usage, have to avoid those problems. About punctuation and capitalization, it's a common problem, and the students have a lot of mistakes in capitalization. And finally, we will focus on punctuation. Okay, let's start with parts of speech. First, we're going to go over nouns and pronouns, and after that verbs, then adjectives and adverbs, and finally prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections. As you see, we have 9 different parts of speech: noun, verb, adjective, pronoun, interjection, conjunction, preposition, and also adverb. Let's start with nouns. A noun is the part of a speech that names a person, a place, a thing, or an idea. For example, and we're going to go over examples. There are different types of nouns. First, about common nouns. Any one of a class of people, places, things, or ideas. For example, sister, state, hour. It is not a specific. It is a common noun. Or it might be proper noun. It is a specific person, place, thing, or idea. And usually we capitalize it. For example, Maria, Sarah, Wednesday, San Francisco. And we have concrete noun. Something you can see, touch, taste, hear, or smell. You can use 5 senses to just experience them. For example, couch, pizza, whistling, perfume. You can use your nose, taste, to just experience them. We call them concrete noun. And finally, we have abstract noun. Something you can't perceive through your senses. So you have 5 senses, you can't just experience with them. For example, anger, peace, success. For example, if I ask you to touch success, you can't touch it. Or you can't smell success. So we call it abstract noun. Now, after each part, I also prepared a few questions. So you can just answer these questions. For the few examples, we will do it together. And after that, I will ask you to do them yourself. And if you have any questions, you can write in the comments below. I will read and I will reply to your comments. So here, let's read each sentence and we will identify the type of each noun. And as you see here, we have common, proper, concrete, and abstract nouns. For example, in the first sentence that we have, the ball is in the grass. So how many nouns do we have? We have one ball and we have grass. Notice. So ball, grass, is it concrete or abstract? It is a concrete. I mean, both of them are concrete because you can see them. You can see a grass. You can see grass. You can see a ball. So they are concrete. And is ball a common noun or proper noun? As you see, ball is not a specific one. So it is not a proper noun. It is a common noun. Grass is also a common noun. So you can do the rest of them. And if you have any questions, feel free to just write in the comments below. As I said, I will read and answer your questions. Okay, now let's continue. Okay, let's go over pronouns. A pronoun is a word that stands for a noun or another pronoun. So we have a noun. Instead of repeating the same noun, we use a pronoun. Pronouns get their meaning from the words they stand for. These words are called the pronouns antecedents. For example, we have personal pronouns. Personal pronouns refer to the person speaking, the person is spoken to, or the person, place, thing, or idea is spoken about. For example, I, me, we, us, you, he, him, she, her, it, they, them. We have possessive pronouns. They indicate ownership or possession. For example, my book, mine, our, ours, your, yours, his, her, hers, its, their, theirs. We have reflexive pronouns and intensive pronouns. They are together. Reflexive pronouns, they end in self or selves and indicate that someone or something in the sentence acts for or on itself. Intensive pronouns also end in self or selves. If it's singular, we use self. If it's plural, we use selves, and add emphasis to a noun or pronoun in a sentence. And we have myself, ourselves, yourself, yourselves, himself, herself, itself, and themselves. Just here, pay attention that for the our is plural, that's why we have selves. But my is singular, that's why we have self. You is an exception if we refer to one person, yourself. If it's more than one person, yourselves. And common mistake among my students is themselves. As you see, we don't have themselves. It is always themselves. Okay, now here, let's do some practice. Identify pronouns and antecedents here. For example, Asa just completed her first marathon. So here, as you see, her is a pronoun. And also her refers back to Asa or Isa. I might mispronounce it. And here, when the car started, it made a rattling sound. Here, it is a pronoun, and it refers to what? It refers to car. So instead of repeating this car, we use a pronoun it. And you can do the third one. If you have a question, you can ask in the comments below. Next one is action verbs and linking verbs. A verb is a word or a group of words that describes an action, a condition, an occurrence, or a state of being. We have action verbs. They tell what action someone or something is performing. For example, go, run, fly, learn. And as you see, we can use them in different tenses. For example, go, goes, is going, went, has gone. And we have linking verbs. Linking verbs connect a subject with a noun, a pronoun, or an adjective that identifies or describes it. For example, we have be, to be, am, is, are, was, were, and different forms. We have the verb feel, become. As you see, they connect the subject with the noun. Now here, you should be able to distinguish between action verbs and linking verbs. First, you have to identify the verb. Here, for example, when I read Sophia studied for the math exam, Sophia is the subject and studied is the verb. Now, is it an action verb or a linking verb? Does it link it or does it show the action? I think it shows the action because you do the action of studying. So, study, or here the past form studied, is an action verb. And I want you to do the rest, and any questions, just write the comments. Next topic is transitive and intransitive verbs. A transitive verb is a verb that has a direct object. An intransitive verb is a verb that doesn't have a direct object. The word that receives the action of a transitive verb is called a direct object. You can determine whether a verb has a direct object by asking whom or what after the verb. Transitive verb, for example, the boy lost his jacket. Here, lost is the verb. And the second one, the baby cried loudly. Cried is the verb. Now, in the first sentence, the boy lost his jacket. And the boy lost what? His jacket. So you see, after lost, we need extra information. We can't say the boy lost. The boy lost what? So you expect extra information. That's why we call it transitive. But in the second one, the boy cried loudly. The boy cried. Yes, cried what? Just cried. There's nothing extra needed here. So it is called intransitive. Now, let's distinguish between transitive verbs and intransitive verbs. For example, let's do the first one. Mr. Smith confirmed his son's plan. So, confirm is the verb here. And Mr. Smith confirmed what? His son's plans. So here we see it's extra information that we need it. We need for the sentence. So it is a transitive verb. Do the second and third one. And any questions? Write in the comments. Next one is about verb phrases. A verb phrase consists of a main verb and one or more helping verbs. Helping verbs are added before the main verb to form a verb phrase. For example, in the sentence, I will be arriving at the school on time, will and be are helping verbs. And arriving is the main verb. Here I didn't just highlight it, arriving. So here, helping verbs, they don't have any specific meaning, they show the time, the tense. But the main one is arrive here. And here we have different forms of verb, of be, to be, am, is, has been, was being, will be, will have been, should be, had been, might have been. And we have other helping verbs, for example, do, does, did, have, and so on. As you see, with these helping verbs, you can also make questions in English. So they are really important for asking questions or making questions. Now here, let's identify helping verbs and the main verbs. Let's do the first one. Mr. Smith is making a documentary. So I see that is making is the verb phrase because it is more than one word, and is the helping one because it's helping to understand the tense of this sentence, and make is the main verb. All right, I'll move to the next topic. Adjectives. An adjective is a word used to describe a noun or a pronoun, or to give it a more specific meaning. An adjective answers one of four questions about a noun or a pronoun: what kind, which one, how many, and how much. For example, we have flower gardens. As you see here, flower, we say what kind of gardens? Flower garden. So flower just gives extra information about gardens. And the second one, that lesson. Which lesson? That one. 67 years. How many? 67. Boundless energy. How much? Boundless. And just one more thing here, 67. As you see, we have hyphen here in the middle between 60 and 7. And because it's an adjective, that's why we write it as one word. And identifying adjective here, let's do just the first one. Some colds really, let me do, okay, number 3. Na wore a grey hat. It is a simple one. So Na wore a hat. What kind of hat? What color? A grey hat. So grey gives more information, describes hat in more detail. That's why it's an adjective. Let's move on to adverbs. An adverb is a word that modifies a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. When an adverb modifies a verb, it will answer one of the following questions: where, when, in what way, to what extent. When an adverb modifies an adjective or another adverb, it will answer the question to what extent. For example, here, the book is here. So here is an adverb here. So it answers the question where. Where is the book? Here. Jacob never walked the dog. When? Never. So never is an adverb here. Brianna kindly offered to help. In what way? Kindly. And also not always, but usually when you see ly, it's an adjective. I'm sorry, it's an adverb. And the last one, they completely lost track of time. To what extent? Completely. As you see here again, we have ly, which shows that it's an adverb. Here also you have to be able to identify adverbs and the words they modify. I'm not going to go over them again, or I will do just one more, and from the next one I will just leave it to you. For example, I'm going to just do, let's say, the first one. Rose smiled gratefully. And as you see, gratefully, just as the first step, it has ly, and it also gives more information about the way Rose smiled gratefully. Let's continue with prepositions and prepositional phrases. A preposition relates the noun or pronoun that appears with it to another word in the sentence. A prepositional phrase is a group of words that includes a preposition and a noun or pronoun, as well as any modifiers, for example, a, an, the, and so on. Prepositions show relationships that involve location, direction, time, cause, or possession. Some prepositions consist of more than one word. Here we have some of them. Let me tell you. For example, about is just one word, across from 2 words, in front of 3 words. As you see, They may just show the cause. For example, here we have because of. Or might show time, for example, at, and so on. Prepositions come at the beginning of prepositional phrases. A prepositional phrase includes a preposition, a noun or pronoun that is called the object of the preposition, and any word or words that modify the noun or pronoun. Here also you have to be able to identify prepositions and prepositional phrases here. I want you to pause the video, identify the prepositions and prepositional phrases. And if you have any questions, just write in the comments below. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. Next one is conjunctions. A conjunction is a word used to connect words or groups of words. We have coordinating conjunctions. A coordinating conjunction joins grammatically equivalent elements, such as two nouns or two independent clauses. There are only 7 coordinating conjunctions. We call them also fanboys, and, but, for, nor, or, so, and yet. We have a correlative conjunction. Correlative conjunction is used in pairs and joins grammatically equivalent elements. There are only 5 pairs of correlative conjunctions. We have both and, either or, neither nor, not only but also, and whether or. And we have a subordinating conjunction. A subordinating conjunction introduces a dependent or subordinate clause. There are many different subordinating conjunctions, and here we have some of them, such as after, because, before, although, and so on. Here, as you see in coordinating and correlative conjunctions, there should be grammatical just the connection. Grammatically, they should be equivalent. But here in subordinating conjunction, for example, after you come. When I say after you come, you expect more information. It is not complete. That's why we call it subordinate clause. It needs extra sentence or extra information to have a complete meaning. And here you have to be able to identify types of conjunctions. First, find the conjunctions, and then what kind of conjunction is each of them. Next one is interjections. An interjection is a word or group of words that expresses feeling or emotion and functions independently of a sentence. They are not dependent. Interjections are different from most other words because they do not have a grammatical connection to other words in a sentence. So there is no grammatical connection. For example, we have ah, dear, oh, ouch. As you see, there is no connection. The sentence might be in different tenses. So we call them interjection, and they show strong emotion or feeling. Here, choose the correct interjection for each sentence based on its meaning. Next one, identifying parts of speech. The way a word is used in a sentence determines its part of speech. A word's job or part of speech in one sentence can be different from its job or part of speech in another sentence. So in one sentence it might be a noun, in another sentence it might be an adjective or a verb. Here, again, we have parts of speech. We have noun, a word that names a person, for example, boy here, pronoun, for example, he, she, it, verb, do, go, blah, blah, adjective, beautiful, tall, adverb, slowly, fast, skillfully. Preposition, toward, at, on, in. Conjunction, and, or, but. And interjection, wow. So again, it was a summary of what we have covered so far. So here you have to be able to identify different parts of speech: nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Here, as you see, some of them are underlined. For example, let's do the first one. And he works hard all day. He, is it a noun? No. Is it a verb? No. Adjective? No. Adverb? No. So it is a pronoun, and you can do the rest. Subjects and predicates. Every complete sentence has two main parts: a subject and a predicate. The complete subject of a sentence consists of a noun or a pronoun. We call it simple subject, plus all of its modifiers. These words tell whom or what the sentence is about. The complete predicate of a sentence consists of a verb or a verb phrase, and we call it simple predicate, plus all of its objects, complements, and modifiers. These words tell what the subject of the sentence is or does. For example, here we have the glass of juice, the fox, my geology paper. As you see, these are just the subject, but complete subject. For example, they have modifier, as you see. For example, the glass of juice. And here we have predicate, we have the verb, is sitting, and the rest of it. So two parts of each sentence: subject and complete predicate. Now here you have to be able to identify simple subjects and simple predicates here in these three examples. Next one is fragments. A fragment is a group of words that lacks a subject, a predicate, or both. It doesn't express a complete unit of thought. Fragments are not usually used in writing because they might not be understood. Fragments can be corrected by adding the parts that are needed to make a complete thought. For example, here we have the frog with warts. As you see, it is not a complete sentence, complete thought. For example, live in those woods. What? So it is not complete. By adding more information and completing it, we can just move fragment to a complete sentence. And fragments are common mistakes of students when they write essays or a piece of writing. Here, try to distinguish sentences and fragments. Which one is fragment? Which one is a sentence, a complete sentence? Next one is subjects in declarative sentences beginning with here or there. By the way, some just terms might not be familiar to you. Don't worry, watch the video till the end and gradually I will just explain all of them. Declarative sentence is a normal sentence. Here and there are never the subject of a sentence. When the words here or there begin a declarative, a normal sentence, they are usually adverbs that modify the verb by pointing out where something is located. Usually a sentence beginning with here or there is inverted, with the subject following the verb. If you rearrange the sentence in subject-verb order, you can more easily identify the subject of the sentence. In each of the examples that we have here, the subject is underlined and the verb is set in boldface. For example, here is your backpack. It is the sentence that we see, and if we rearrange it, your backpack is here. So we can see that backpack is the subject, and here just gives information about the location of this backpack. So here is an adverb. So don't get confused. Here, rearrange these sentences and try to identify the subject of each sentence. Next topic, subjects in interrogative sentences. In an interrogative sentence, the subject often follows the verb. Interrogative means question. Interrogative sentences are questions. Some interrogative sentences use subject-verb order, but usually they are inverted. Verb, subject. Do, you. So do is the verb, you is the subject. To help locate the subject, rearrange interrogative sentences into subject-verb order. For example, we have, is the library open on Sunday? And just we rearrange it. The library, we take it to the beginning of the sentence. The library is open on Sunday. As you see here, the library is open on Sunday. If you just rearrange it, you can understand the subject of the sentence, which is library here. Now here, identify the subjects and verbs in these interrogative sentences. Interrogative, question. Next topic, subjects in imperative sentences. In an imperative sentence, the subject is understood to be you. Imperative sentence, for example, you give command, do it, go there, open it. As you see, I don't say you go there. Just automatically you can understand the subject is you. The subject of an imperative sentence is usually implied instead of being specifically stated. So, for example, here we have some examples. First, do your homework. I don't say first you do your homework. Automatically you understand that I'm talking to you. After school, come directly home. After school, you come directly home. So you can understand you from the context. Now here, rewrite these imperative sentences to include you in each sentence. Next one is subjects in exclamatory sentences. In exclamatory sentences, the subject often appears after the verb, or it may be understood as you. For example, we have leave now, hot dogs, you do know what. As you see here, these are exclamatory sentences. And the subject, for example, what do you know? And we say, you do know what? Leave now. You leave now. So you can understand. Hot dogs. You can buy hot dogs. So again, from the context, you can understand the subject of these exclamatory sentences. Let's continue with direct objects. A direct object is a noun, a pronoun, or a group of words acting as a noun that receives the action of a transitive verb. If you remember transitive verbs, they need an object. Direct objects complete the meaning of action verbs by telling who or what receives the action. Verbs that have direct objects are called transitive verbs. They transfer their action onto direct objects. Some verbs are intransitive, meaning nothing receives the action of the verb, and the question who, whom, and what can't be answered. For example, here, she makes cookies for her friends. So she makes whom? She makes what? So you see, she makes cookies. So understand that make is a transitive verb. And the second one, fish can breathe through their gills. Fish can breathe. Who, what? There is no answer. Fish can breathe. That's it, finished. So there is no object. That's why it's intransitive. And the last one, some hugged his mother. Sam hugged whom, what? So you can just find the answer. Mother hugged his mother. So it is transitive. Hug is a transitive verb. And here, breathe is intransitive verb. Now here, identify sentences with direct objects in these three sentences. Next topic is indirect objects. An indirect object is a noun or a pronoun that appears with a direct object and tells to whom, to what, for whom, or for what a transitive verb's action is done. Only sentences with direct objects can have indirect objects. For example, here, let's look at these sentences. Yuan reads his sister a story. So here I find the verb read. So reads whom or what? Reads a story. So story is a direct object. And read a story to whom? To his sister. So sister is indirect object. So just we answer the question, whom or what, we get a direct object. And to whom or to what, we get indirect object. Now here, she works quickly. She works what? She works whom? So there's no answer. So work is intransitive verb. So we cannot find any direct or indirect objects for the second sentence. And the last one, Mia gave her mother a kiss on the cheek. Gave is the verb. Gave what? Gave whom? Kiss. Kiss is the direct object here. Gave what? Gave a kiss. And gave a kiss to whom? To whom? To what? To his mom. Mom is the indirect object in this sentence. Now here, identify direct objects and indirect objects in these three sentences. Next one, object complements. An object complement is an adjective or a noun that appears with a direct object and describes or renames it. An object complement almost always follows a direct object. Object complements occur only with such verbs as appoint, call, consider, declare, deem, elect, find, judge, label, make, name, select, and think. The words to be or forms of the verb to be are often understood before an object complement. For example, here we have the parents found the performance enchanting. As you see, parents is our subject, found is the verb past form, and here we have direct object, performance. Found what? Performance, direct object. Now here we have object complement, and so it describes, it gives more information, enchanting. So what kind of performance? Enchanting. And here to be, we can understand from the context that yes, it was enchanting, but we don't need to write it. Now here, identify object complements in these three sentences. Next one is subject complements. A subject complement is a noun, a pronoun, or an adjective that appears after a linking verb and gives more information about the subject. There are two kinds of subject complements. We have a predicate nominative. As you see, nominative is a noun or a pronoun that appears after a linking verb and names or identifies the subject of the sentence. For example, Joseph is a programmer. So programmer is a noun and it comes after a linking verb. Is a linking verb, and it is predicate nominative because it just completes the subject. Or we have predicate adjective. A predicate adjective is an adjective that appears after a linking verb and describes the subject of the sentence. So here, again, we have the linking verb is. After the linking verb, we have warm. It's an adjective. Warm, cold, beautiful, adjective. And it describes the subject. That's why we call it predicate adjective. Some sentences contain compound subject complements. For example, Joseph is a programmer and a father. Programmer, father, two nouns, so it is a compound subject complements. Now here, identify subject complements in these three sentences. Next one is prepositional phrases. A prepositional phrase such as behind the house includes a preposition behind, a noun, for example here we have a noun house, a pronoun called the object of the preposition, and any word or words that modify the noun or pronoun. For example here we have the, it modifies house. So behind the house is a prepositional phrase. Prepositional phrases can act as an adjective, in which case they are called adjectival phrases, or they can act as an adverb, in which case they are called adverbial phrases. For example, here we have prepositional phrases. Adjectival phrase modifies a noun or a pronoun because it has the role of an adjective. An adverbial phrase modifies a verb, adjective, or another adverb because it has the role of an adverb. So for adjectival phrase, what kind? Which one? The questions are answered with what kind, which one. For example, the man in the red coat. Which man? The man in the red coat. So it gives information about man, describes man. That's why it's an adjectival phrase. It has the role of an adjective. The second one, the cat hid under the bed. Where? Under the bed. Where just gives information about the location, and it has the role of an adverb. That's why it shows the location of the cat, and it is an adverbial phrase. Now here, identify adjectival and adverbial phrases in these three sentences. Next one is appositives and appositive phrases. An appositive is a group of words that identifies, renames, or explains a noun or pronoun. An appositive usually follows right after the word it explains. Appositives and appositive phrases, which include descriptive words, are used to combine two choppy sentences into one flowing sentence. When an appositive is non-essential to the meaning of the sentence, commas are used before and after the appositive. When an appositive is essential to the meaning of the sentence, commas are not used. In the examples below, two sentences are combined into one sentence that includes an appositive phrase. As you see here, we have two sentences. Sue's car is an old station wagon. Second sentence, Sue's car can't handle icy roads. Now here we have two sentences. Why not combining them? And Sue's car, an old station wagon, can't handle icy roads. As you see here, we combine them and we have a group of words here, an old station wagon. So it's an appositive. And we have two commas here. Because we have two commas, so it is non-essential. So the meaning is clear. Sue's car can't handle icy roads. You say, okay, I got the meaning. Or if you want to just give more information, we say Sue's car, more information, an old station wagon, between two commas, and the rest of the sentence. And here, as we had, an appositive usually follows right after the word it explains. Here we have the car. So this appositive, let me just erase everything. Okay. This appositive describes car. So directly we used it after car. And two sentences, we combined them, and because it was non-essential, we used two commas here. Now here, you may have also some questions about appositive and adjective clauses. As you can see here, appositive is a noun or phrase that sits next to another noun to rename or describe it. But adjective clauses is a dependent clause. For the adjective, who, blah, blah, when, blah, blah. Those are adjective clauses. And they act as an adjective. Adjective clauses are clause, but appositives can be nouns, noun phrases, or noun phrases. They do not usually, appositives do not usually begin with relative pronouns or adverbs. We didn't start, for example, here with when, where. But in adjective clauses, we always begin with a relative pronoun, when, that, and so on. And appositives define, rename, or describe the noun or pronoun. And adjective clauses, they describe or modify the noun or pronoun. And here you can see the differences between them. Now here, identify appositive phrases in these three sentences. And if you have questions, ask in the comments below. Verbal phrases. A verbal is a verb form that is used as a noun, an adjective, or an adverb. A verbal that includes modifiers or complements is called a verbal phrase. Verbals look like verbs, but they are not verbs. Verbs express action in a sentence. Verbals describe another word. Verbals can be essential or non-essential to the meaning of a sentence. When they are non-essential, as we talked earlier, they have commas on both sides. When they are essentials, they don't need any commas. When a verb acts as an adjective, it forms a participle. The two most common kinds of participles are the present participle. Over here, it means ing form, and the past participle, or the third form of the verb. If it's regular, if it's a regular, we add just ed. If it's irregular, we should just memorize it. For example, go, went, gone. Here, gone is the third form of the verb go. And participles can include modifiers, in which case they form a participial phrase. Here we have three sentences. Identify verbals and verbal phrases. Now, let's continue with independent and subordinate clauses. A clause is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb. An independent clause, and we also call it main clause, can stand by itself as a complete sentence. Every sentence must contain at least one independent clause. So it is complete, the meaning is complete. A subordinate clause or dependent clause has a subject and a verb, but it cannot stand alone as a complete sentence. So the meaning is incomplete. Now here, for example, Owen is new to running, but he hopes to run a marathon someday. As you see, the first sentence is a new runner. So the meaning is complete, so it is independent. It doesn't need something extra. And here, He hopes to run a marathon someday. Here, again, it's the meaning is complete, so it is independent. But when we come to the second one, although Owen is new to running, so we say although, so you say, so what? If I finish the sentence here, you don't understand it. You say, okay, what? I expect more. He hopes to run a marathon someday. So here the second part is independent, can stand alone, but the first part needs extra information to be complete. That's why we call it subordinate or dependent clause. It depends on the second part. Now here, identify the independent and subordinate clauses in these four sentences. Adjectival clauses. An adjectival clause is a subordinate clause that acts as an adjective. It modifies a noun or a pronoun in another clause by telling what kind or which one. An adjectival clause cannot stand alone. It is a subordinate clause, as we talked earlier, that must be connected to an independent clause. Adjectival clause or clauses can be essential or non-essential to the meaning of the sentence. When they are non-essential, they are set off from the rest of the sentence by a comma or commas, as we talked earlier. When they are essential, no commas are used before and after them. An adjectival clause usually begins with a relative clause, relative pronoun. For example, who, whom, whose, which, or that. It may also begin with a relative adverb, such as when or where. For example, here we have the sentence, the car that had been ticketed was towed away. So here, as you see, we have the relative pronoun, that, and it is essential to the meaning. That's why we don't have any commas. The underlined part answer the question, which one? So it gives extra information about the car. We are talking about this car. So we just give more information about the noun in the sentence. Now here, can you identify the adjectival clauses in these three sentences? Next one is restrictive relative clauses and non-restrictive relative clauses. Relative pronouns, as we talked earlier, who, whom, whose, which, that, what, whoever, whomever, whichever, and whatever, have two jobs in a sentence. They connect an adjectival clause, a clause that modifies a noun, as we said, it gives more information about the noun, to the word it modifies. Look at the sentence as a whole to see how the relative pronoun does this. And they act as the subject, direct object, object of the preposition, or an adjective within the clause. You can identify what the pronoun is doing within the clause by pulling the adjectival clause away from the rest of the sentence. Now here, can you identify relative pronouns and their clauses? Next topic is about adverbial clauses. An adverbial clause is a subordinate clause again that acts as an adverb, like its name. It modifies a verb, an adjective, or an adverb in another clause by telling where, when, in what way, to what extent, under what condition, or why. An adverbial clause begins with a subordinating conjunction and contains a subject and a verb. The chart that we have here shows us some common subordinating conjunctions. Note that some subordinating conjunctions consist of more than one word, that you have to memorize them together. For example, as if, so that, even though, as long as. Like adjectival clauses, adverbial clauses can be used to combine the information from two sentences into one sentence that shows the relationship between the ideas. In the example below, the adverbial clause is underlined as you see. For example, we have you are going out for groceries. You should also pick up the dry cleaning. We have two sentences. Now we want to just combine them. As long as you are going out for groceries, it needs extra information to be complete. You should also pick up the dry cleaning. Now here, identify how adverbial clauses just are made, and you can underline them. Noun clauses. A noun clause is a subordinate clause that acts as a noun. In a sentence, a noun clause may act as a subject, a direct object, a predicate nominative, an object of a preposition, or an appositive. Sometimes noun clauses can be difficult to identify because they begin with the same introductory words that can be used to begin other types of clauses and phrases, words such as that, which, who, whom, whose, how, if, what, whatever, where, when, whether, and why. You can test whether a clause is a noun clause by replacing the clause with it, that thing, or that person. If the sentence still sounds correct, you probably replaced a noun clause. Notice that the underlined clause in the example below is a noun clause that is acting as the subject of the sentence. You can replace the clause with it, and the sentence still sounds correct as you see here. Whatever Bailey does makes me laugh. So instead of whatever Bailey does, we can write it. It makes me laugh. So it is meaningful. So we've identified a noun clause here. Now, can you identify noun clauses in these three sentences? Next topic is 4 structures of sentences. A sentence's structure is determined by the number of independent or main clauses and the number of subordinate or dependent clauses the sentence contains. The 4 possible sentence structures are simple, compound, complex, and compound complex. If a sentence is simple, a single independent clause would be the definition of it. For example, he wants chicken for dinner is a simple sentence. Compound sentences have 2 or more independent clauses. So here we have, for example, Carrie wants chicken for dinner, Chris wants fish. So 2 independent clauses are connected with a coordinating conjunction. Complex sentences have 1 independent clause and 1 or more subordinate clause. For example, here we have although, so this part is the subordinate clause, and it depends on the second one. Although Carrie wants chicken for dinner, Chris wants fish. And we have also compound complex. Compound complex sentences have 2 or more independent clauses and 1 or more subordinate clauses. For example, although Chris wants fish for dinner, Carrie wants chicken, so they are going to a restaurant. So here we combined a complex with another independent clause or independent sentence. So we combine complex and compound together. We made compound complex sentence. Now here, can you identify simple and compound sentences in these 3 examples? Next topic is 4 functions of a sentence. Sentences can be classified according to how they function. That is, whether they state ideas, ask questions, give orders, or express strong emotions. The four possible sentence types are declarative, interrogative, imperative, and exclamatory. For example, declarative sentences state an idea, ends with a period. For example, Jacob sings in a choir. So it's a normal sentence and we end it with a period. Interrogative sentences ask a question, ends with a question mark. It's like a question. Another technical name is interrogative. Imperative sentences give a command or make a request, end with a period or an exclamation point. Here it might be period or exclamation point. For example, don't forget, set the timer. So you give order or you just make a request. And finally, exclamatory. Exclamatory sentences convey strong emotions, end with an exclamation point. As you see, we have an exclamation mark here. What a mystery that was. Now, can you punctuate the following four types of sentences based on the type? Now, let's talk about sentence combining. You can combine two short, choppy sentences by forming compound subjects, verbs, or objects, or by forming compound or complex sentences. The chart that we have here shows examples of ways in which two short, choppy sentences can be combined into one more effective sentence. For example, Alma plays video games, Marcus plays video games. So here, Alma and Marcus, we just combine them with and. Alma and Marcus play video games. So we make a compound subject. Instead of just simple subject, we have compound subject. Or here, we mowed the lawn, we racked the leaves, so we combine two, we combine two verbs. Let me just erase it. Okay, here, let me again, okay. Here we have two verbs and we combine them together and we added and. Or we can have compound objects. For example, Link plays chess, Link plays soccer, soccer, chess. So we combine them. Now the sentence is much better. Or we can have compound sentences. Most bears have varied diets, pandas eat mainly bamboo. So two sentences that we have here, we combine them and we make a compound sentence. Or we can have a complex sentence. For example, Angelo turned blah blah, Angelo parked. After Angelo blah blah, he parked the car. After Angelo turned onto Main Street, comma, he parked the car. So we can just make our sentences much better. Now here, can you identify compound subjects, compound verbs, or compound objects in these sentences? Now let's talk about varying sentence lengths. Varying the lengths of your sentences can help you develop a rhythm, achieve an effect, or emphasize the connections between ideas. Effective writers use a variety of sentence lengths. If your writing includes too many short, choppy sentences, consider combining two sentences by turning the ideas in one of the sentences into, for example, a prepositional phrase, a participial phrase, or a subordinate clause. If your writing includes too many long, complicated sentences, consider breaking up one of the sentences into two shorter sentences. Now, can you revise the sentence? For example, it is done, to be honest. Our new television displays crisp images, comma, and I appreciate those crisp images. Now I appreciate the crisp images that our television displays. So we just revised it so it is more fluent. Let's continue with varying sentence beginnings. Varying the beginnings of your sentences can help you maintain your audience's interest. Effective writers vary the ways in which they begin their sentences. They don't always start the same way. When too many of your sentences begin with the subject of the sentence, for example, he, she, a pronoun, a noun, or a noun phrase, your audience, your reader may lose interest. Consider beginning some of your sentences with elements such as adverbs, prepositional phrases, participial phrases, and infinitive phrases. For example, here, and the subject, I went to soccer practice. I is the subject here. Let's just start it with an adverb. Clearly, comma, the problem is complex, so I add variety. Or prepositional phrase, before I left, comma, I packed emergency supplies. Again, I added prepositional, I started with a prepositional phrase. Or participial phrase, concerned that I might be late, comma, I left extra early. Or we can start with an infinitive phrase, to achieve my goals, comma, I finally set a plan. So these are different ways to vary your sentence beginning. Now, can you identify varied sentence beginnings in these three sentences? Next topic is using inverted word orders. Word order in a sentence is inverted when the subject follows the verb. Inverting word order in another way is another way to make your sentences more interesting, so it is not repetitive. For example, we have a bunch of bananas sat in the bowl. Oops. Here, subject, a bunch of bananas, verb, sat in the bowl. So it is a normal sentence. Now, in the bowl sat a bunch of bananas. So we just inverted this sentence. Now here, can you identify subjects and verbs in these three sentences? Now, let's continue with recognizing fragments. A sentence fragment is an incomplete sentence, as we talked. A fragment is a group of words that is missing a subject, a predicate, or both. One strategy for correcting a fragment is to connect it to the words in a nearby sentence. Another strategy is to add any sentence parts that are needed to make the fragment a complete sentence. For example, here, text that includes a fragment, for example, Jenny wants a digital camera like girls. For example, this like girls, it's an incomplete just part. It's a fragment. So Jenny wants a digital camera like girls. So we combine them so the meaning is complete. Or confused about how to use the digital camera. It is a fragment. There is no just verb here. But we combined it with another sentence. Jenny reread the instructions. So it is a meaningful, complete sentence. Now, can you identify fragments in these three sentences? And let's talk about avoiding run-on sentences. A run-on sentence is two or more sentences capitalized and punctuated as if they were a single sentence. So we have two sentences, but we just capitalize them like a sentence. A run-on sentence occurs when two independent clauses are joined together in an improper way. Sometimes there is no punctuation. There is no punctuation mark separating the clauses. Other times there is only a comma separating the clauses. Just when we have two independent clauses and we have a comma to separate them, which is wrong, it's a type of run-on sentence that is known as a comma splice. It's very common. One way to correct a run-on sentence is to separate the independent clauses with a semicolon, and when appropriate, a transitional word or phrase. Another way is to separate them with a comma and a coordinating conjunction. A third way is to turn one of the independent clauses into a subordinate clause by adding a subordinating conjunctions or a relative pronoun. For example, here we have the game went into overtime, we couldn't stay to watch. Here, as you see, we have two sentences here. First sentence, second sentence, but we don't have any punctuation. Now, let's look at corrections. The game went into overtime. Here we have a semicolon. Unfortunately, comma, the rest. Second one, we have comma. Here we have coordinating conjunction, the rest. And the first one, although we just added a subordinating conjunction. Also blah blah, comma, the rest of the sentence. So here we could just correct a run-on sentence. Now can you revise to eliminate run-ons in these three sentences? Let's continue with recognizing misplaced modifiers. A misplaced modifier is placed too far from the word or words it modifies, so it appears to modify the wrong word or words. A misplaced modifier may be an individual word, such as an adjective or an adverb, a phrase such as a prepositional phrase or a participial phrase, or an entire clause, such as a relative clause. When modifiers are misplaced, they can confuse your audience because they appear to modify the wrong words. To correct a misplaced modifier, move it closer to the word it modifies. For example, here, a man walked by the store talking loudly on the phone. Here, talking loudly on the phone, it just modifies a man. It gives information about the man, but it is too far from the word it modifies. It might be a bit confusing, but here, by just replacing it, we just make it more meaningful and easy for the reader or listener to understand. A man talking on the phone, so we know that talking loudly on the phone is just this man walked by the store, not another person. Now, can you identify misplaced modifiers in these three sentences? Let's move on with recognizing dangling modifiers. A dangling modifier seems to modify the wrong word or no word at all because the word it should modify has been left out of the sentence. You have to correct a dangling modifier by adding missing words and making other needed changes. For example, here we have a sentence. If you look at this sentence, registering at the door, a higher price will be paid. So you're asking who is registering. In the first sentence, we don't have a specific answer to this question. But when we correct it, we can add participants, so it is specific, so we won't be confused. Registering at the door, participants will pay a higher price. Now, can you identify dangling modifiers here? I'm gonna just leave it to you, so if you have any questions, write in the comments below. Let's move on to recognizing the correct use of parallelism. Parallelism involves presenting equal ideas in words, phrases, clauses, or sentences of similar types. Here we might have parallel words. If you look at this sentence, here we have one adjective, another adjective, and the last adjective. So here they have the same form, same type. That's why it is parallel. Or we can have parallel phrases: behind the diner, around the corner. So here we have prepositional phrase. Both of them have the same grammatical structure: behind preposition, around preposition, the article, diner, corner, noun, noun. So you see we have similar structures. Or we might have also parallel clauses. For example, here we have one clause and we have the second clause. That clause, that clause. So the same relative clauses, we haven't changed it. Or we might have parallel sentences. You can curse the darkness. You can light a candle instead. You, can, verb, and the rest. So you see sentences with similar grammatical structures we've got here. Both of them are in the same tense. We haven't used different, let's say, tenses here. So we have parallel sentences here. Now here, can you identify parallel grammatical structures in these three sentences? Next topic is correcting faulty parallelism. It is very common. Faulty parallelism occurs when a writer uses unequal grammatical structures to express related ideas. Here, for example, we have non-parallel words. For example, we have Rhoda likes hiking, ing, running, ing, to ski. So as you see, to ski doesn't match with hiking and running. So we can just change it. We can, instead of writing to ski, we write skiing. So the same ing, same structures, same words. Same structures. We might have non-parallel phrases. For example, Harry is trying to outrun, but here we have ing form. So instead of just having different structures, we can just change it to the similar structure with the first part. We might have non-parallel clauses. For example, here, I, subject, verb, I prefer memoirs, blah, blah, blah. Whereas fiction is preferred by my brother. Here we have passive voice. Here we have active voice. Two different structures. So we can just change the second one from passive to active voice. My brother prefers fiction. So we can just correct it. Now, can you identify faulty parallelism and correct in these three sentences? Next topic is correcting faulty parallelism in a series. Here we have non-parallel structures on the left. For example, Amir likes to stir fry, to grill, or steaming. As you see, it is ing form. Here these two are with to. So we can just change it to the same structure with the previous words. So it becomes a parallel structure. Or here we have, for example, riding, skateboarding, to read. So as you see, to read doesn't match with these two structures. Just we can change it. Again, ing, same structures. So we corrected those two faulty parallel structures. Now, can you identify faulty parallelism in a series in these three examples? Next one is correcting faulty parallelism in comparisons. Faulty parallelism occurs when a writer uses non-parallel words, phrases, or clauses in comparisons, when we compare two things or three things or more. In making comparisons, writers generally should compare a phrase with the same type of phrase and a clause with the same type of clause. For example, here we have many teens prefer texting to a phone conversation. Here we have texting, ing form. Here we have a noun form, a noun phrase. Here we can just change it to texting, to talking. So they have similar grammatical structure. ing form, we compare two things, texting and talking, and they are the similar structures. Now, can you identify faulty parallelism in a comparison in these three sets of sentences? Now let's move on recognizing faulty coordination. When two or more independent clauses can stand alone, they are meaningful, of unequal importance, are joined by and or another coordinating conjunction, the result can be faulty coordination. Faulty coordination occurs when two clauses are connected by a coordinating conjunction by a subordinating conjunction or a relative pronoun would better express the relationship between the ideas in the two clauses. For example, here we have Jessie didn't answer when I called, and she was talking to someone else. Here we have and as the coordinating conjunction. But the meaning is vague, it is not correct. Now let's just change it. Jessie didn't answer when I called instead of and because she was talking to someone else. So here I used a preposition to just show the cause of not answering the phone. So it is correct. We don't need to just use a coordinating conjunction here because of the meaning. Now, can you recognize faulty coordinations here and correct them? Let's continue with correcting faulty coordination. As we talked, faulty coordinations is caused by an unclear relationship between clauses and can be corrected by making the relationship between those clauses clear. For example, here, the tundra is a unique habitat and it has many interesting plants. So here we have again and. It's a coordinating conjunction, but here it's not correct, it's not clear. Now we have different ways, we have three ways to correct it. First, we can divide it. The habitat, many, we can just divide it. We can use period, two sentences. We can use a relative clause, relative pronoun here. The tundra is a unique habitat where many interesting plant grows. Or the tundra, non-essential phrase here, and we use comma around it. The tundra, comma, a unique habitat has many interesting plants. Now, can you revise to eliminate faulty coordination in these three sentences? Let's continue with 6 verb tenses. We have more tenses, we have 12 tenses, but here we're going to go over 6 of them. We have present simple. For example, here we have the main verb know. For example, I know. Past, simple past, I knew. Future, I will know, or I am going to know. Present perfect, I have known. And past perfect, I had known. And finally, future perfect, I will have known. So knowing tenses can help you write with variety. Now, can you identify verb tenses in these 3 examples? Let's continue with 4 principal parts of verbs. A verb has 4 principal parts: the present, present participle, past, and past participle. Here, let's make it easier. For example, we have present forms: work, drive, present simple. Present participle, we add ing. Past form, if it's regular ed, if it's irregular, we have to memorize drove. And past participle. Past participle have verbs 3, the third form, have plus verbs 3. If it's irregular, you have to memorize. Past forms are verb 2, second form, and past participle verbs are the third form of the verb. Let's continue with regular and irregular verbs. Regular verbs form the past and past participle by adding ed or d to the present form and sometimes doubling the final consonant. Irregular verbs do not use a predictable pattern, so it is not predictable. You have to memorize it to form their past and past participle. For example, here we have some regular and some irregular ones. Let's go over regular ones. For example, we have, let's say, signal, signaling, signaled, have signaled. You see present, present participle, past and past participle forms. And here for irregular ones, we don't have a predictable pattern. For example, we have run, running. Here we double the consonant, n, ran, past form, and have run, the past participle form. So you have to memorize irregular verbs. You can find them on the internet and gradually you can memorize. Let's continue with verb conjugation. A conjugation is a complete list of the singular and plural forms of a verb in a particular tense. The three principal parts, the present, the past, and the past participle, are used to give all 6 of the basic forms. The present participle is used to conjugate the progressive tense. For example, here we have I am walking. So we add ing to just make this tense. We have present, past, and future tenses. The basic, progressive, and emphatic forms of the 6 tenses show time within one of 3 general categories. It might be present time, past time, or future. For example, here we have I listen, present simple, I am listening, present continuous, I do listen. Here we added do here. It is emphatic. We emphasize, we make it stronger. Or we can have past form, I listened, have listened. Yeah, have listened is present perfect, but it is something that happened in the past. Had listened, was listening, have been listening, had been listening. And we have also I did listen. Here this did is again emphatic. So we emphasize, we make it stronger. And for future forms, I will listen, will have listened, will be listening, I will have been listening. Different forms of future tenses. Let's continue with sequence of tenses. When a sentence has more than one verb, the sequence of tenses in those verbs must be consistent with the time order in which events happen in the sentence. Which one happens first, after that, and finally. So it should be clear for the reader. Verb tenses help show when events happen, as well as the order in which they happen. When you encounter a sentence with multiple verbs, think about the time order in which the events must logically occur. Sometimes the different tenses of the verbs will be a clue to the order of events. Other times, the verbs may have the same tense, yet there is still a logical order in which the events must happen. Here, you shouldn't compare it with your own language because in some languages, it might not be similar to English. For example, here we have I went to the grocery store today and I bought a gallon of milk. I put the milk in the car and then I drove home. Here all of them are simple past, as you see, but we have some indicators. For example, then, it shows that first I put it in the car, after that I drove home. So here we can see the order. Now, can you correct errors in tense sequence in these three examples? Let's talk about simultaneous events. Simultaneous events are events that happen at the same time. Some sentences with two or more verbs express events that happen simultaneously or at the same time. Sometimes a subordinating conjunction such as, when, or while will signal that the events are simultaneous. Events happen at the same time. Other times, the context of the sentence, the situation will reveal that the events must logically occur at the same time. For example, here, Ava hums along as she listens to the song. So two activities are happening at the same time. Or in the past, hummed, listened. Again, we have as here. So it shows that two events, two actions, two things happened at the same time. Or here, will hum and as she listens. Just here, there is a grammatical structure. Present tense is often used to show the future time, particularly in subordinate clauses. Here we have as, because when we have as, it becomes a subordinate clause, so it can't stand alone. That's why in English, we use simple present to talk about future. But two things, two events, happen at the same time or will happen at the same time. Can you identify simultaneous events in these three sentences? Let's continue with the sequential events. Sequential events are chronological. An initial event is followed by one or more events. One happened, then next, after that another one, and so on. In present time, for example, she listens to the song and then buys the album. So first listening and after that buying the album. Two events, one after another. Or in the past time, she listened to the song and then bought the album. Again, listened, first act, and after that buying the album, the second one. Or here, spanning past and future time, she listened to the song and soon will buy the album. So first listened in the past and soon in the future, probably tomorrow, that person, she will buy the album. Again, the first one and the second event. Now, can you identify sequential events in these three sentences? Let's move on to modifiers that help clarify tense. Adverbs and adverbial phrases can clarify the time expressed by a verb. Here, for example, Ralph washes his car weekly. Nate washes his car monthly. So these weekly and monthly are adverbs, and they clarify the frequency. Or we have adverbial phrases here. Al walks to school every day. Al jogs in the park twice a week. So here we can understand frequency of these events. Can you identify modifiers that help clarify tenses in these three examples? Next topic is using the subjunctive mood. It's a bit weird. It might be weird to you. The subjunctive mood can be used to express a request, a demand, or a proposal. It can also be used to express an idea that is contrary to fact. There are three moods, or ways in which a verb can express an action or a condition. We have indicative mood, imperative mood, and subjunctive mood. The indicative mood, which is the most common one, is used to make factual statements. For example, she is helpful. It is an indicative mood. And to ask questions, is she helpful? The imperative mood is used to give orders. For example, be helpful. Imperative mood. There are two important differences between verbs in the subjunctive mood and those in the indicative mood. First, in the present tense, it is important. Third person, he, she, it, singular verbs in the subjunctive mood do not have the usual s or es ending. So it is weird. We don't have it. Second, in the present tense, the subjunctive mood of the verb to be is be. So we don't have is, are, am. We use be. In the past tense, the subjunctive mood of the verb to be is were, regardless of the subject. If it's he, again were. If it's she, were. It, were, and so on. It might be new to some of you. The third mood, the subjunctive mood, can be used in two ways. Use the subjunctive mood in a clause beginning with that to express a request, a demand, or a proposal. So in these limited areas you can use them. Use the subjunctive mood in a clause beginning with if. For example, second conditional. Or that to express an idea that is contrary to fact. It is imaginary. If I were you. It is imaginary. I can't be you. If I were. That's the reason we use were instead of was. For example, here, I suggest that, so it is a proposal. I suggest that he attend. There is no s. Normally we use attends, but it's a subjunctive mood. In limited areas, with limited verbs, we can use it. Or to express an idea contrary to fact, as I said, if Mia were here, it is imaginary, not real. Mia can't be here. We could finish the project, not was. So pay attention to it. Can you recognize the subjunctive mood in these three sentences? Next one is auxiliary verbs that express a subjunctive mood. Because certain auxiliary verbs could, would, should suggest conditions contrary to fact, imaginary situations, they can often be used with a main verb to express the subjunctive mood in a clause beginning with if. For example, if Jared were here, not was, and here we have auxiliary verb could. If Jared could be here, he would help me. He would help me. So here we have to be expressed in the subjunctive mood. And here we have auxiliary could, auxiliary verb, which is used to express the subjunctive mood. Now, can you identify auxiliary verbs that express the subjunctive mood in these three sentences? Next one is active and passive voice. The voice of a verb shows whether the subject is performing the action of the verb or is receiving the action of the verb. Active voice, when we say active voice, it shows that the subject is performing an action. I am doing the action. Passive voice shows that the subject is having an action performed on it. So something is done. Here, for example, Jamal attended the surprise party. Jamal did the action. Jamal did the action of attending the surprise party. But in the passive voice, The surprise party was attended by Jamal. So we generally have by, we have passive voice structure that you shouldn't be confused. Can you identify active and passive voice in these three examples? Can you use active and passive voice correctly? Use active voice whenever possible. It is easier to understand in everyday conversation. Use passive voice to emphasize the receiver of an action or when the performer of an action is not easily identified. For example, Angela was escorted to her seat, so some people just helped her. The second one, the sponsors of the performance were listed in the program. So both of them are passive voices. Can you recognize the performer of an action here in each of these sentences? In the previous one, okay, here about the performer, and as you see here, we don't know who performed the action. And the sponsors of the performance were listed in the program, but who performed the action? Again here, and the performer of the action is not easily identified. We can't understand who did it, who that person was, or who those people were. Okay, again here, can you recognize? And let's continue with pronoun case. Case is the form of a pronoun that shows how it is used in a sentence. The three cases of pronouns are the nominative, the objective, and the possessive. Here, for example, nominative, I, we, you, he, we start the sentences with them. Objective, me, us, you, it, him, blah, blah, blah. We use them as the object. And possessive, they show ownership. For example, my book, mine, our, ours, and so on. Here also we have examples, and if you're not sure about them, you can just Google them. You can find the list, and with some examples, I think you won't make any mistakes. Can you label pronouns in these three examples? Let's continue with the nominative case of pronouns. Use the nominative case when a pronoun is the subject of a verb, a predicate nominative, or part of a nominative absolute. Here, for example, we have as the subject, he is a terrific pianist as the subject, or here we have as the predicate nominative, the winner were he and they. And in a nominative absolute, she being the winner, the judges congratulated her. Just different ways to use these pronouns. Can you identify pronouns in the nominative case in these three examples? Let's move on to the objective case of pronouns. Use the objective case when a pronoun is the direct object of a verb or a verbal, such as an infinitive, a participle, or a gerund. Gerund is ing form. The indirect object of a verb or of a verbal, or the object of a preposition. For example, here we have the employer hired him. Hire is the verb, so him is the object of the verb. Or here we have, if you are going to the beach, I'd be happy to meet you. And as you see, meet is an infinitive, to meet is an infinitive. And here, indirect object of a verb, friends send, I'd be happy to meet. Okay, here, you was just a pronoun here. Here, friends sent her an indirect object, sent her a birthday. They sent present, direct object, sent her a present. So again, it's a pronoun. And the indirect object of the verb, sending her the notes would be helpful. Object of a preposition, don't wave the branch above him. Above is the preposition and him is the pronoun here. Can you identify objective pronouns in these three examples? And if you have questions, as I told you several times, write in the comments below. I'll answer your questions. Let's move on to the possessive case of pronouns. Use the possessive case to show ownership. For example, here, my, mine, your, yours, and so on. For example, the dog is mine, or this is my dog. Your suggestion, his decision, our friend, or the food supplies are theirs. As you see, they show ownership. Can you here identify possessive pronouns in these three sentences? Let's continue with using who and whom correctly. Who is used for the nominative case? Whom is used for the objective case. When who and whom are used as interrogative pronouns in questions, when we use them in questions, they follow rules similar to the rules for personal pronouns. Use the nominative case, who, for the subject of the verb, or for a predicate nominative. Use the objective case, whom, for a direct object, or for an indirect object, or again, for the object of preposition. When who or whom introduces a subordinate clause, such as a relative clause in the middle of sentence, or a noun clause, its form depends on its role in the subordinate clause. If it is the subject of the verb in the subordinate clause, use the nominative case who. If it's the direct or indirect object of the verb in the subordinate clause, use the objective case whom. Now in these examples, you can understand clearly. For example, nominative, who or whoever. For example, who answered the ad, who answered the phone, so it is a subject. The speaker is who, predicative nominative. We weren't sure who would drive, and here we have a subject of the subordinate clause. Here we have relative clause. And we have objective form, whom. Whom will you be calling? I'll be calling my mother. So my mother, whom. So it is the object. To whom are we sending the card? Against the object. We are sending the card to, let's say, Ahmed. We knew whom the caller wanted, and direct object of the subordinate clause here. Can you identify pronouns here? Let's continue with pronouns in elliptical clauses. An elliptical clause is one in which some words are left out, but are still understood. You can understand them from the context, but we don't have those words. In elliptical clauses beginning with than or as, use the form of the pronoun that you would use if the clause were fully stated without deleting them. To determine the case, mentally add the missing words. For example here, if the missing words come before the pronoun, choose objective case. For example, the noise bothered Yoshiro more than me. The noise bothered Yoshiro more than it bothered me. So here we can understand it bothered me, this sentence, it bothered is just eliminated here. So that's why we call it elliptical clause. But we can understand. We don't say more than here, the noise bothered Yoshiko more than I. Because it's an objective case. That's why we say more than me in this case. And if it's nominative case, if the missing words come after the pronoun, choose a nominative case here. For example, Gabriella enjoyed the play as much as I. As much as I did. Did is the extra word, we remove it. So here, because it's like a subject, Gabriella enjoyed, I enjoyed. So here we can't write me. It's a common mistake. So if you're not sure, just pay attention to the first part. Pay attention to the first part of the sentence. And just try to think if it works, if you continue it with me. For example, Gabriela enjoyed the party as much as me did. So it doesn't work. It doesn't sound right. So you can understand that it's not me. For example, here, the noise bothered Yoshiko more than it bothered I. So it doesn't sound correct. So you can just make a complete sentence to see if it works for you or not. Can you identify elliptical clauses in these three examples? Next topic is number in nouns, pronouns, and verbs. Number shows whether a noun, pronoun, or verb is singular or plural. Most nouns form their plurals by adding s or es. Some like tooth or woman form the plurals irregularly, so we don't have again any rules. For example, teeth, women. This chart that we have here shows the different forms of personal pronouns used as subjects. For example, we have I, he, she, it, we, they, you. And as you see, in English, singular and plural you is the same, just you. A verb form will always be singular if it has had an s or es added to it, or it includes the words has, am, is, or was. The number of any other verb depends on its subject. Subject means the word that we start the sentence. For example, he is, he goes, we are, we go. This chart shows verb forms that are always singular and those that can be singular or plural. For example, here we have he walks, she walks, Bill walks, and so on. And also we have has if it's in present perfect tense, is, was, because they are all singular, one person. And here, verbs that can be singular or plural, for example, I, you, we walk, have, you are, we were, they were, and so on. Now, singular and plural subjects. A singular subject must have a singular verb. A plural subject must have a plural verb. This subject-verb agreement is the common mistake of students, so always pay attention to it. For example, here we have the scientist works in the lab. So scientist is one person, he or she works in the lab. The scientists work in the lab. So always pay attention to it. For example, Zoe and Taylor are looking for. The sisters were. Banks have. Or here, Bank has. Beth, she was. Zoo is. So always pay attention to these singular and plural subjects and verbs. Let's move on to compound subjects. A compound subject has two or more simple subjects, which are usually joined by or and. Here, a compound subject joined by and here is generally plural and must have a plural verb. For example, we have school, playground, two subjects, and we connect them with and. So it is plural. We use have. We don't use has here. Or two plural subjects, schools and playgrounds have. Two schools and a playground have. And if it's again more than, for example, one plural noun, when we connect them with and, just as a simple rule, use a plural verb. Two or more singular subjects joined by or nor must have a singular verb. For example, snow or sleet is expected this weekend. So here we have or because it's one of them, this one or this one. That's why we use singular verbs. Two or more plural subjects joined by or nor must have a plural verb. For example, neither the mayors nor the governors are attending the conference. If a singular subject is joined to a plural subject by or nor, the subject closest to the verb determines agreement. What it means is neither the musician nor the fans look pleased. Here, this verb is closer to this noun, so we focus on it. For example, here, musician is singular, so it takes S here. We don't focus on the first part. We don't pay attention to it. So just when we have nor or. So just pay attention to it. It's important for your writing. Can you identify singular and plural verbs in these three examples? Let's move on to confusing subjects. A verb must agree number with the subject. In some sentences, a verb will appear before the subject. In such cases, you can determine whether the verb should be singular or plural by mentally rearranging the sentence so that the subject appears first. For example, here, in the pond are many beautiful fish. So here is the example. Let's rearrange it in your mind. Many beautiful fish are in the pond. By the way, fish is plural and singular of the fish is fish. And here we talk about many of them. And here, where are my friends? Just rearrange it in your mind. My friends are where? So here you can understand the friends are subject. Here, fish is the subject. The words there and here often signal an inverted sentence. So it is not a normal sentence. These words never act as the subject of a sentence. For example, here is the package you ordered. If you rearrange it in your mind, you can see, let me see, okay, it's not here. The package you ordered is here. So package is the subject. There are warm blankets in the closet. If you just rearrange it, you can see that warm blankets are in the closet. The blankets is the subject of this sentence. A linking verb must agree with its subject, regardless of the number of its predicate nominative. For example, the students are my only concern. Here, are just follows the subject. So it agrees with the subject, not with the rest. Here, my only concern, it's just one. So we don't say the students is my only concern. Now, can you identify singular and plural verbs in these three examples? Let's talk about agreement between personal pronouns and antecedents. A personal pronoun must agree with its antecedent in number, person, and gender. An antecedent is the word or group of words for which the pronoun stands. For example, here, as you see, John stored his luggage in the locker. Here, his is the pronoun here, and it refers to John. John is called an antecedent. For example, the second one, the students were surprised by their test results. There is the pronoun. It refers to students. Students is the antecedent of there. Use a singular personal pronoun when two or more singular antecedents are joined by or nor. For example, neither Sarah nor Mary will talk to her brother. Both of them are singular and they are females. Use a plural personal pronoun when two or more antecedents are joined by and. Mike's brother and sister brought their dog to the park. Because here we join them with and, but here we join them with nor. Use a plural personal pronoun if any part of a compound antecedent joined by or nor is plural. For example, either the police officers, plural, or the witness should give their testimony. So here, one of them is plural, so we use their. Now, can you choose the correct personal pronoun for each sentence here? Let's talk about agreement with indefinite pronouns. An indefinite pronoun refers to an unspecific person or thing. Examples of indefinite pronouns include all, any, anybody, both, each, every, everybody, most, no one, some, and somebody. As you see, they are unspecific. When an indefinite pronoun is used with a personal pronoun, the pronouns must agree. For example here, use a plural personal pronoun when the antecedent is a plural indefinite pronoun. For example, many of the workers complimented their boss. Because many is plural, so we use plural pronoun here. Use a singular personal pronoun when the antecedent is a singular indefinite pronoun. For example, each is singular. Each of the girls will practice her part in the science presentation. Here, some students get confused here. They say, okay, it's girls, but we are not talking about all of them. We are talking about one of them. That's why we use singular pronoun. So pay attention to it. Now, can you choose the correct indefinite pronoun in each of these sentences? Let's talk about agreement with reflexive pronouns. A reflexive pronoun is a type of pronoun that refers back to itself. It remains the subject or emphasizes the word it refers back to. Reflexive pronouns end in self or selves. For example, myself, yourself, himself, herself, ourselves, yourselves, and themselves. And should only refer to a word earlier in the same sentence. For example, here, Olga made that bookshelf herself. Herself is a reflexive pronoun. It refers to Olga. Olga is a female person, so we used herself. Or here, they helped themselves to the free food. Themselves refer again to they. The dog found itself, and itself refers to the dog here. Now, can you identify reflexive pronouns and their antecedents in these three examples? Let's continue with vague pronoun references. To avoid confusion, a pronoun requires an antecedent that is either stated or clearly understood. The pronouns which, this, that, and these, as you see here, should not be used to refer to a vague or too general idea. For example, here, the house had heating and plumbing issues. So heating issues, plumbing issues. These concerned us. Which one concerned us? What concerned us? Heating, plumbing, what? But here we specify it. These problems concerned us. So here it's not vague. So don't use, for example, these, that, this in formal writing. The personal pronouns it, they, and you should always have a clear antecedent. For example, in the newspaper, they quoted our governor's speech. For example, here they is vague, but in the newspaper, two reporters, more specific, quoted our governor's speech. So here, when we make just our points specific, it is more academic and it is correct. And it's and with all these techniques, you can avoid confusion. Now, can you identify vague pronoun references in these sentences? And next topic is ambiguous pronoun references. A pronoun is ambiguous if it refers to more than one antecedent. For example, Frank emailed Sam before he left school. Here we have he. Does it refer to Sam or does it refer to Frank? So we don't know. It is ambiguous, it's not clear. When the second one, Frank emailed Sam before Sam left school. So we know which one. Here in some cases, you should be specific. The following is an example of ambiguous pronoun repetition. Here, when Elena asked her mom if she could use the laptop, she said that she needed it. Okay, who is she? Is it Elena or her mom? Which one? We don't know. In the following revision, the writer clarifies this statement by indicating that Elena's mother needs the laptop, which is emphasized by the reflexive pronoun herself. So here, when Elena asked her mother if she could use the laptop, her mother said that she needed it herself. So here it's more specific and it is not ambiguous anymore. Can you identify ambiguous pronoun references in these three examples? And let's talk about avoiding distant pronoun references. A personal pronoun should always be close enough to its antecedent to prevent confusion. You can correct a distant pronoun reference by changing the pronoun to a noun. For example, here, let's say Mr. Mullen forgot his computer at the store and he meant to go back right away, but then he got distracted by his son and a game of baseball. When he went back and looked, it was lost. So what does it refer to? It is too far. Here it refers to his computer, but as you see the distance, it is after all these words we have it. So it is confusing, so we should just specify it. So instead of writing it, we write his computer was lost. So when the location is too far, just pay attention to it. Can you identify distant pronoun reference in this sentence? Next topic is recognizing degrees of comparison. The 3 degrees of comparison are the positive, the comparative, and the superlative. The following chart shows adjectives and adverbs in each of the 3 degrees. Modifiers are changed to show degree in 3 ways: by adding er or est, by adding more or most, by using entirely different words. The comparative degree involves a comparison of 2 items. Superlative degree involves a comparison of more than 2 items. So here, for example, the positive is cold. For example, the weather is cold. When we compare two things, here is colder than your city. And comparative compares 2 things, and superlative compares more than 2 things. For example, here is the coldest city, for example, in Turkey. And as you see, we have est for superlative if it's more than 1 syllable, most, and some of them are irregular. For example, for good, we use best. And for adverb, coldly, more coldly, most coldly. Again, the same scenario. Now, can you identify the use of comparison in these three sentences? Let's talk about regular forms. The number of syllables in regular modifiers determines how their degrees are formed. Use ER or more to form the comparative degree, and EST or most to form the superlative degree of most 1 and 2 syllable words. For example, we have the adjective clear, comparative clearer, and superlative clearest. But when it's a bit longer, wishful, more wishful, most wishful. Use more and most to form the comparative and superlative degrees of all modifiers with 3 or more syllables. For example, we have industrious, more industrious, most industrious. All adverbs that end in ly form their comparative and superlative degrees with more and most. For example, silently, we have ly, more silently, most silently. Can you identify comparative and superlative degrees in these three examples? And let's talk about irregular forms. The comparative and superlative degrees of a few commonly used adjectives and adverbs are formed in unpredictable ways. You have to memorize them. Therefore, the irregular comparative and superlative forms of these adjectives and adverbs must be memorized. For example, here we have the adjective bad, badly, ill. We use worse, worst. Far for distance, farther, farthest. Far for extent, further, furthest. Good, well, better, best. Late, later, last or latest. Little, less, least. Many, much, more, and most. You have to memorize these irregular modifiers. And next topic is using comparative and superlative degrees. Use the comparative degree to compare 2 persons, 2 places, or 2 things. Use superlative degree to compare 3 or more persons, places, or things. For example, here, that writer is more talented than this one. So we have this one and another one, 2 things to compare. That cartoon is sillier than this one. Again, 2 items we compare. And in superlative, the writer is the most talented one in the group. So here we have a group. This writer is more talented than every single person. So we use superlative. Or that cartoon is the silliest of all. Using logical comparisons. Your sentences should only compare items of a similar kind. We can't compare 2 completely different items. For example, Ellen's bike is faster than June. Here we are talking about bike. So here it should match. Ellen's bike is faster than June's bike. For example, the speed of the train is faster than the car. The speed of the train is faster than the speed of the car. So here we just make it balanced. When comparing one of a group with the rest of the group, make sure that your sentence contains the word other or the word else. Here I underline them. For example, Chuck was slower than any runner. Chuck was slower than any other runner, so it is accurate. Avoid comparisons with absolute modifiers. It's a common mistake of many learners. Some modifiers can't be used logically to make comparisons because their meanings are absolute. That is, their meanings are entirely contained in the positive degree. For example, if a decision is final, another decision cannot be more final. Final is the end. So there is no more final or less final. Avoid using absolute modifiers illogically in comparisons. Some common absolute modifiers include dead. So somebody is dead. So somebody can't be more dead or less dead. It's just dead. Entirely, fatal, final, identical, infinite, opposite, perfect, right, straight, wrong, unique. So when we have sentences, for example, that painting looks perfectly straight on the wall. So it's straight, it's not perfectly straight. Or sometimes people say very unique. Unique is unique. It doesn't have more unique or less unique. Do not use an absolute modifier that overstates the meaning. For example, here we have her approach is entirely unique. Unique is unique. So we can't say more unique, entirely unique, and so on. Let's talk about recognizing double negatives. Using two negative words in a sentence when one is sufficient and enough is called a double negative. Do not use double negatives in formal writing. In spoken English, you might hear it, but in formal writing, avoid it. For example, here we have, we don't have no time to waste. No, don't, both of them are negative. In formal writing, avoid them. We don't have any time to waste. We have no time to waste. One of them would be enough. Or here, she didn't have nothing. So nothing, didn't, both of them are negative. In formal writing, just avoid it. She didn't have anything to do, or she had nothing to do. If a sentence has more than one clause, each clause may correctly contain one negative word. For example, the first clause, the second clause. It has one negative and another negative. We didn't make it to the beach, but we weren't sad about it. So here we have two clauses. It's not a double negative. Can you identify double negatives in these three examples? And let's talk about forming negative sentences correctly. The most common ways to make a statement negative are to use one negative word such as never, no, or none, or to add a contraction, not, to a helping verb. Use only one negative word in each clause in a sentence. Don't use two of them together. For example, here we have didn't, no, so don't use it. We didn't have. One negative would be enough. When but means only, it is usually a negative. Don't use it with another negative word. For example, there wasn't but one correct answer. So instead we prefer there was but one correct answer, there was only one correct answer. Both of them just have the same meaning. Do not use the word barely, hardly, or scarcely with another negative word. For example, we didn't have scarcely enough time to finish the test. Instead, let's prefer we had scarcely enough time to finish, or we didn't have enough time to finish. So these two are more accurate, and they just mention the same idea. Let's talk about using negatives to create understatement. Writers use understatement to express an idea indirectly, either to minimize the importance of the idea or to draw attention to it. Understatement can be achieved by using a negative word and a word with a negative prefix such on, in, im, this, and under. Look at the following examples that use negative words to create understatement. For example, they were not uninterested in the plot. So here we just minimize the importance of the idea. We were scarcely unconcerned about the problem. Again, we just minimize the importance of the idea. Let's continue with common usage problems. A good writer masters how to avoid common usage problems such as the ones that we have here. Ain't. In formal writing, always use am not, is not, are not. Never use ain't. For example, instead of saying he ain't going, use he is not going. So don't use it in formal writing. Among and between, it's also a common mistake or common misuse. Use among to show a connection among 3 or more items. So it's more than 2. Use between to show a connection between 2 items. In a spoken English, yeah, you might use both of them, but again in formal writing, try to follow this rule. For example, I will ride my bike between those 2 towns. The teacher divided the books among all classes. So here we have more than 2. Farther and further. Use farther to refer to distance. Use further to mean additional or to a greater degree. For example, he must run farther to win the race. So it's about the distance, running. We must talk further to give additional information about the problem. Fewer and less. Use the word fewer with nouns that can be counted, with countable nouns. Use less with qualities and quantities that cannot be counted. Use it with uncountable nouns. For example, fewer flights would mean less congestion. So here congestion is an uncountable noun, that's why we used less, but flight is countable, that's why we used fewer. Let's talk about using capitals for first words. Capitalize the first word in declarative, interrogative, imperative, and exclamatory sentences everywhere. For example, here, normal sentence, O is capitalized, big letter. In the question, W is capitalized, big W. And imperative, T is capitalized, big T, capital T. And exclamatory, W is capitalized. So always capitalize the first letter or capitalize the first word. Capitalize the first word in interjections and incomplete questions. For example, amazing, exclamation mark. A is capital. Incomplete question, where? Again, capital. What name? Capital. So as you see, even if it's one word, we capitalize it. The word I is a common mistake among learners. The word I is always capitalized, always. We don't have lowercase I in English. Whether it is the first word in a sentence or not. For example, Mark and I is capitalized. Always I, when it's a pronoun, capitalize it. And using capitals with quotations. Capitalize the first word of a quotation. For example, my brother said, don't forget mom's birthday. So D is capitalized here. Do not capitalize the first word of a continuing sentence when a quotation is interrupted by identifying words. For example, after we saw you, Kevin said we felt better. So here we don't capitalize we because it is interrupted by Kevin said. Do not capitalize the first word of a continuing sentence when the first word of a quotation is the continuation of a speaker's sentence. For example, Mr. Mehta said that the student project was a wonderful effort. So it is the continuation of this sentence. So we don't capitalize it. It is not something else. Using capitals for proper nouns. Proper nouns name specific examples of people, places, or things, and they should be capitalized. Capitalize each part of a person's name, even when the full name is not used. For example, Olivia Chen. O and C are capitalized. A, E, H, L, G. They are capitalized. Capitalized geographical and place names. For example, here we have streets, Main Street, MS, Chicago, CB, Boston. For example, towns and cities, counties and states. For example, Kingston County, C. Maine. For the nations and the continents, Ireland, Africa, AI. Mountains, for example, Bear Mountain, BM. Sections of a country, for example, the Midwest, M, is capitalized here. Or bodies of water, lake, mead, L, M. And monuments and memorials, for example, Vietnam Memorial, V and M are capitalized. So pay attention to it, it's important for your writing. Capitalize words indicating direction only when they refer to a section of a country. For example, the class report is about the northwest. The bus turns east. Here, it's just a location, direction. So capitalize the words indicating directions only when they refer to a section of a country, not in other cases. And capitalize the names of specific dates, specific events, documents, holidays, religious holidays, periods in history, and historic events. All of them are specific. For example, Tuesday, October 4, Bill of Rights, Columbus Day, Korean War, KW. As you see, the first letters are capitalized. And using capitals for proper adjectives. A proper adjective is either an adjective formed from a proper noun or a proper noun used as an adjective. Capitalize most proper adjectives and proper nouns used as adjectives. For example, here we have Mayan Temple, M. Mayan is an adjective here. We have the Jefferson paper, J is capitalized. Capitalize a brand name when it is used as an adjective, but do not capitalize the common noun it modifies. For example, work hard sweatshirts. Here, W and H are capitalized. Do not capitalize a common noun used with two proper adjectives. For example, Park and Madison Avenues. Using capitals in letters. Capitalize the first word and all nouns in letter salutations and the first word in letter closings. For example, here, when you start, for example, your letter with Dear Mr., as you see, D and the name is also capitalized, D is capitalized, and we have also comma here, or here we have colon, Dear Ms. Hadley, and again, D is capitalized, M capitalized, H capitalized. And also when we close our emails, for example, best wishes, B is capitalized, then we have colon, with affection, sincerely, and so on. Using capitals for titles. Capitalize a person's title only when it is used with the person's name, or when it is used as a proper name by itself. Relatives are often referred to by titles. For example, here, I voted for Mayor Frank. M, F, both of them are capitalized because here mayor is also the title with the name. And as a proper name, I appreciated your letter, grandfather. G is capitalized here because grandfather here is considered as a proper name. Do not capitalize titles showing family relationships when they are preceded by a possessive noun or pronoun. Likewise, do not capitalize titles when they are used as a general reference. Examples: my mother, the mayor of our town, So here, these are just general, so not specific. Don't capitalize them. And capitalize the first word and all other keywords in the titles of books, magazines, newspapers, poems, stories, plays, paintings, and other works of art. For example, as you see, T and C are capitalized, B is capitalized. When it's the title of a book or magazine, capitalize it. Capitalize the names of educational courses when they are language courses or when they are followed by a number or preceded by a proper noun or adjective. Do not capitalize school subjects discussed in a general manner. For example, we have, for example, German, G is capitalized, advanced algebra, A and A, both of them are capitalized, physics 204, P is capitalized, but when it's general, for example, geology, don't capitalize it. Let's continue with using periods. Periods are used at the ends of declarative sentences, mild imperative sentences, and indirect questions. For example, here a declarative sentence is a statement of fact or opinion. For example, the dinner was excellent. As you see here, we have a period. An imperative sentence gives a direction or a command. For example, clear the table. Again, we finish it with a period. An indirect question restates a question in a declarative sentence. For example, my mother asked if I was still hungry. Again, we have period here. Other uses of periods. A period can signal that words have been shortened or abbreviated. Use a period after most abbreviations and after initials. Also use periods after numbers and letters in outlines. Do not use periods with acronyms, which are words formed with the first few letters of a series of words. For example, here we have abbreviations of titles, place, names, times, dates, and initials. For example, Ms., we have a period, governor, GOV, period, Monday, MON, period. So when we just abbreviate them, when we make it shorter, we use also period. For example, January, JAN, period, and the rest. Other abbreviations with period, for example, dozen, DOZ, period, and means, measure, page, pages, and so on. Periods in outlines, for example, here, 1, period, A, period, B, period, C, period. So here, it's this part is the outline, and we have also a period to separate them. Do not use periods in acronyms and some abbreviation. For example, NASA, because we read it as one word, we call it an acronym. So don't use any abbreviation here. For example, USA, don't use UN, don't use any periods to separate the letters. Do not use periods in abbreviations of metric, measurements, postal abbreviations of states, and most standard measurements. For example, millimeter, mm, you don't need to use any just period. For example, tx, qt, gal, and so on. Using question marks. A question mark should be used after a direct question. Here in this one, we directly ask the question, why do you have to leave early? And we have question mark. A question mark should be used for an incomplete question. Really? Question? Question mark. How? Question mark. Yeah, it's just one word, but it's an incomplete question. Again, we use a question mark. A question mark should be used for a statement intended as a question. For example, with my tone of voice, I just changed this statement to a question. Your title is manager? So with my tone of voice, you can understand that it is a question. So you can use a question mark. Do not use a question mark with an indirect question, which is a statement that contains a question. An indirect question can be fixed by removing the question mark and adding a period, or rephrasing the statement so that it is a direct question. For example, here we have indirect question. She asked whether I wanted to go. And here we have a question mark, which is wrong. We can just correct it. She asked whether I wanted to go, period. So it is correct. Or I wonder whether I should go to the party. Again, here we have question mark, which is wrong. We can just correct it. I wonder whether I should go to the play. Here, again, period. Or just changing, should I go to the play? Question mark. So we have two alternatives here to correct the punctuation mistake. Using exclamation points. An exclamation point signals an exclamatory sentence, a forceful imperative sentence, an interjection with emphasis, or any other exclamation. Exclamation points indicate strong emotion and should be used just appropriately. For example, here, and I can't believe I won. I won. For example, let me just read it again. For example, here, because we have an exclamation mark, I would read it like this. I can't believe I won. So with my tone of voice, you can understand that I'm excited and I have a strong emotion. What a nerve-wracking game that was. What a nerve-wracking game that was. Again, I just express my emotion. A forceful imperative sentence, for example, go up to your room, if it were period, but here we have exclamation point. So I say, go up to your room. So I'm angry. An interjection with emphasis, wow. Interjection is just one word. So again, I'm gonna just emphasize here, wow, that was a great movie. So again, I may make my point stronger. Using commas with compound sentences. A comma tells the reader to pause briefly before continuing a sentence. A compound sentence consists of two or more main or independent clauses that are joined by a coordinating conjunction, as we covered earlier, such as and, but, for, nor, or, so, or yet. Use a comma before a conjunction to separate two or more independent or main clauses in a compound sentence. By the way, in some books, they may not use a comma for some reason. I'm gonna just skip that part. Just here, I simplify it. For example, here, my sister is going on a camping trip, comma, but I will not be able to join her. It is also a style. As I said, sometimes some authors may not use it. Avoiding comma splices. When two independent clauses are incorrectly joined with a comma, it is called a comma splice. Comma splices are a type of run-on sentence. For example, here, the storm brought over 4 inches of rain. Many streets were flooded. So here, this part and the first part, they are meaningful. Two independent sentences. So why should we just add this comma here? So we don't need this comma because both of them, each of them can stand alone. There are several ways to correct a comma splice. Add a comma and a conjunction and, but, or, yet between the independent clauses. Add a semicolon between the independent clauses. Create semicolon was this. Create multiple sentences, or revise the wording of the sentence. For example, here, this storm brought over 4 inches of rain, period, second sentence. The storm brought over 4 inches of rain, comma, so many streets were flooded. And the last one, the storm brought over 4 inches of rain, semicolon, and the rest of the sentence. So here are different ways to just avoid this mistake. Using commas in series. A series contains of 3 or more words, phrases, or subordinate clauses of a similar kind. Use commas to separate 3 or more words, phrases, or clauses in a series. For example, here we have series of words. For example, the items on the grocery list include cereal, comma, milk, comma, orange juice, comma, and lettuce. As you see here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 items. So just to divide them, separate them, we use a comma between each of them. And here we have a series of phrases. The recipe said to separate the eggs. To separate the eggs, to add the milk, and to sift the flour. As you see here, again we used comma to just separate the series of phrases. Series of subordinate clauses. In my job interview, I stated that I had prior experience, comma, that I had completed a first aid course, comma, and that I could provide references. As you see here, we used commas to separate subordinate clauses in this sentence. Using commas between adjectives. When you place 2 or more adjectives before a noun they describe, make sure to use commas correctly. Use commas to separate coordinate adjectives, which are adjectives of equal rank. Test whether adjectives are equal by switching their order or by placing the word and between them. If the meaning of the sentences stays the same, the adjectives are equal. For example here, the group had a carefree, relaxed discussion. We have carefree, relaxed. The group had a carefree, comma, relaxed discussion. To just correct it. Don't use commas to separate cumulative adjectives, which must have a specific order. By type, cumulative adjectives should appear in the following order: quantity, opinion, size, measurements, age, shape, color, proper adjectives, material, and purpose. Generally, we don't have all of them together, so you won't be confused. Just after just listening to some speakers, English speakers, you can just get used to it. For example, here, there are large 3 crows in the tree. If you see, for example, large 3 crows in the tree, so naturally we say 3 large crows because of the order, and it's natural. Don't use a comma between the last adjective in a series and the noun it modifies. For example, here Ahmed started the rusty, creaking tractor. So this comma is extra. You don't need to use any commas before the last adjective. After the last adjective. Alright, now let's practice using commas correctly with adjectives. Can you just identify if it's correct or not? And if you have questions, again, feel free to write in the comments below. Using commas after introductory material. A comma tells the reader to pause briefly before continuing a sentence, as we talked earlier. Use a comma after an introductory word, phrase, or clause. For example, here yes is an introductory word. That's why we have a comma here. Or introductory noun, Lena is an introductory noun. That's why we have a comma here, because our sentence starts with it. Eventually, adverb. Again, we have a comma after that. To write a good report, comma, here is a phrase, introductory because it introduces the sentence. And also adverbial clause if you like sports car, cars, comma, the rest of the sentence. Using commas with parenthetical expressions. Use commas to set off parenthetical expressions from the rest of the sentence. For example here, can you recommend a good restaurant? Comma, Mrs. Wells. So as you see here, Mrs. Wells, it's a noun of direct address. So just to separate it, we can use a comma. If you just remove it from the sentence, again, the meaning would be clear. Conjunctive adverbs, for example, I can, indeed is an adverb here. So we have two commas because it's in the middle of the sentence and it is conjunctive. That's why we use also comma around it. Common expressions, for example, you all like Mexican food, I assume. Again, comma, the rest. And contrasting expressions, we have to go to a place that is walking distance, not driving distance away. Again here, just we have a contrasting expression. That's why we have also comma, two commas around it. Using commas with non-essential expressions. A comma tells the reader to pause briefly before continuing a sentence, as we talked earlier. A non-essential or non-restrictive expression can be left out of a sentence without changing the meaning of the sentence. Use commas to set off non-restrictive expressions. For example here, in these three sentences, the book was written by Ernest Hemingway. Now, if I remove this part, the famous author, again, the meaning is clear. You don't need anything extra. It's just extra. It is not essential to the meaning of the sentence. That's why we have a comma here. Or the story is about an old man and the sea. Again, it is complete. We add extra information here. That's why we have these two commas to show that it is non-essential to the meaning of the sentence. Or here the title, again, comma, comma, non-essential, adjectival clause, and the previous one was participial phrase. Using commas with dates and geographical names. When a date is made up of two or more parts, use a comma after each item, except in the case of a month followed by a day or the year. When a geographical name is made up of two or more parts, use a comma after each item. When a name is followed by one or more titles, use a comma after the name and after each title. For example, here we have dates. The building is scheduled to open on May 15th, comma, 2024. Dates without commas, June 2001. Geographical names, for example, my mother goes to Berlin, comma, Germany, comma, for business. So here it is again non-essential here. Names with one or more titles, for example, J blah blah blah, comma, PhD, comma, as you see, to just separate it. Using commas in numbers. Commas make larger numbers easier to read. With large numbers of more than 3 digits, use a comma after every third digit starting from the right. For example, here we have 7,898 books. So use a comma to separate 10,000, comma. We have 1, 2, 3, and then comma. 1, 2, 3, comma. 1, 2, 3, comma. So it becomes easier for the reader to read. Do not use commas in zip codes, telephone numbers, page numbers, years, serial numbers, or house numbers. For example, here, there is no comma, as you see, page number and so on. There is no comma in any of them. Using commas with addresses and in letters. Commas are used in addresses, salutations of friendly letters, and closings of friendly or business letters. For example, here, use a comma after each item in an address made up of 2 or more parts. Note that no comma is used after the state abbreviation. For example, here, Mrs. blah blah blah, comma, 42 blah blah blah, comma, Austin, comma, and the rest. Use a comma after the name, street, and city of an address. For example, send blah blah blah, comma, comma, comma. And use a comma after the salutation in a personal letter. For example, dear Joe, comma, grandma, and so on. And also when you close your letter, for example, yours truly, comma. Don't forget these commas. Using commas in elliptical sentences. In elliptical sentences, words that are understood are left out. As we talked earlier, commas make these sentences easier to read. For example, use a comma to indicate the words left out of an elliptical sentence. For example, Marcus made 3 drawings, semicolon, Ella, comma, 2. So we can understand that Marcus made 3 drawings, Ella made 2 drawings. So to make it just clear for the reader, we use a comma over there. Using commas with direct quotations. Commas are used to set up a direct quotation from the rest of the sentence. Don't forget, for example, here, don't forget to pick your sister up after school, comma. My mother said, comma, because she's not taking the bus today. So here, it's a direct quotation, and we have my mother said in the middle of the sentence, so we have commas around it. I replied, comma, direct quotation, great, comma, answered mom, and the rest. Using commas for clarity. Commas are used to prevent a sentence from being misunderstood. Sometimes a sentence might be misunderstood by the reader. For example, here in the first one, after we put out the fire alarms stopped ringing. I didn't know where I had to stop. But in the second one, after we put out the fire, I paused, alarms stopped ringing. So it is easier for me and I won't misunderstand anything. Misuses of commas. Commas are used so frequently that sometimes writers insert commas that are unnecessary. Avoid using unnecessary commas. Here we have misused them with an adjective or a noun. For example, original sentence, I carried my heavy, comma, bulky, comma. As you see, this second comma is just extra. You don't need it. And misused with a compound subject. For example, my cousin, this comma is extra. My cousin and I went to our grandparents' house. The second comma is also extra. We don't need it. We don't read it. My cousin and I went. Doesn't make sense. Misused with a compound verb. For example, he cooked dinner and blah blah. So we don't need this comma. The sentences are short. Cooked dinner, read his read his little brother a story. So there is no need comma to use a comma here. And misused with a compound object. For example, she wore gloves. Again, no need for this comma. And a hat while shoveling snow. Misused with phrases and clauses. For example, having finished her homework and having cleaned her room. So we know that this is just extra. This is together is a clause. And the rest of the sentence. Using semicolons to join independent clauses. Semicolons establish relationships between two independent clauses that are closely connected in thought and structure. Do not use a semicolon to connect two unrelated independent clauses. Use a period or another end mark instead. Use a semicolon to connect related independent clauses that are not already joined by the coordinating conjunction, as we talked, and, but, for, nor, or, so, and yet. For example, here, Gretchen has a dog, semicolon, Carla has a cat. Gretchen has a dog, semicolon, Carla has a cat, semicolon, Juan has both. So here we use semicolons to separate them. Use a semicolon to join independent clauses separated by either a conjunctive adverb, such as also, besides, first, however, instead, then, therefore, or transitional expressions such as in fact, as a result, on the other hand, and so on. So here our car won't be fixed until tomorrow. We have semicolon, therefore, comma, the rest of the sentence. So you can use them after semicolon. So it is good for your writing. Using semicolons to avoid confusion. Sometimes semicolons are used to separate items in a series. Use semicolons to avoid confusion when independent clauses or items in a series already contain commas. For example, here Walter Nicholas, comma, who is a noted explorer, we know that it is non-essential because we have two commas, has signed a contract with a major television network, semicolon, a series of blah blah blah, to just make it to avoid confusion. Use semicolons to separate items in a series when the items contain commas. For example, here we have a semicolon, semicolon. As you see, here we have also other commas. So if we don't use a semicolon, it will be confusing for the reader. For example, the apartment has a bedroom, which has a large closet, a bathroom, which has a double sink, and a kitchen, which has a new stove. So when I have those semicolons, it just makes it easier for me as the reader. Let's continue with using colons. The colon, as you see the symbol, is used to introduce a list of items, and in certain special situations, use a colon after an independent clause to indicate a list of items. To fix the door, we needed the following items. So here I have a colon, here I have the items. So to just introduce a list of items, we use a colon. Use a colon to introduce a formal or lengthy quotation, or one that doesn't contain a he said, she said expression. For example, as Plato, the philosopher, once said, here I have a colon and there is a long quotation here. And use a colon to introduce a sentence that summarizes or explains the sentence before it. Capitalize the first word in each. For example, here I have I had a very good reason for not calling you last night, colon, and capitalizing M, the second sentence. My mother was on the phone with my grandmother for 2 hours. So it is the reason for the first sentence. It summarizes the first sentence. Use a colon to introduce a formal appositive that follows an independent clause. For example, we finally decided where we would go on vacation, Orlando, Florida. Here also we have a colon. And use a colon to in numerals giving the time, salutations in business letters, and references to periodicals and the Bible, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. For example, here the time, 3, semicolon, dear madam, colon, 3:23, dear madam, and John 3: blah blah. Using quotation marks with quotations. Quotation marks identify words that have been spoken or written by others. A direct quotation represents a person's exact words, thoughts, or writing. An indirect quotation, which doesn't use quotation marks, reports the general meaning of what a person said or thought. For example, here we have a direct quotation. Why didn't you finish the project? I asked Geraldo. Here, as you see, it's direct. We have quotation marks. An indirect quotation doesn't require quotation marks. Gerald said that he had completely forgotten about it. So it is indirect quotation. We don't have any quotation marks. Using direct quotations with introductory, concluding, and interrupting expressions. A writer will generally identify a speaker by using words such as he asked or she said with a quotation. These expressions, called conversational taglines or tags, can introduce, interrupt, or conclude a quotation. For example, here, use a comma after a short introductory tagline that precedes a direct quotation. My sister said, comma, quotation, I will drive you to school, end quotation. Short introductory tagline. Use a colon after a very long or formal tagline. As we talked, here we have a colon. This is a very long just quotation here. And use a comma after the part of a quoted sentence followed by an interrupting tagline. Use another comma after the tagline. For example, here, first part of the quotation, last part of the quotation. Here, this part is just interrupting. So I will drive you, comma, quotation, said my sister, comma, quotation, to school today. Use a comma, a question mark, or an exclamation point after direct quotation, followed by a concluding tagline. For example, here, quotation mark, no thanks, I'd rather walk to school today, comma, closing your quotation, and the concluding tagline. Quotation marks with other punctuation marks. The location of quotation marks in relation to other punctuation marks varies. Place a comma or a period inside the final quotation mark. For example, here, that is one fabulous necklace, comma, my cousin said. So here we have placed a comma after inside the final quotation. It is inside this quotation. Place a semicolon or colon outside the final quotation mark. So I just bought the fabulous necklace, colon after the quotation. Place a question mark or an exclamation point inside the final quotation mark. Do not add an additional end mark at the end of the quotation. For example, here, my cousin asked, comma, quotation mark, would you mind blah blah blah, question mark, and then quotation mark. So we don't add anything after the quotation mark here. Using single quotation marks for quotations within quotations. Double quotation marks, as you see here, over here, should enclose the main quotation in a sentence. Use single quotation marks to set up a quotation within a quotation. Here we have an example. For example, Michael said, quotation, double quotation mark, as you see. But inside we have another quotation inside quotation. That's why we use the single quotation marks to just make it easier for the reader to understand. Punctuating explanatory material within quotes. Sometimes when a writer quotes a speaker directly, the writer adds explanatory information that was not part of the original quote. Such added information is bracketed to show that it was added. For example, here, the principal said, the new science labs, so, let me just open again the pen. So here we have just extra information that I added as the reader here, or as the writer here. I'm sorry, as the writer here have stated of blah, blah, blah. So make sure that just pay attention to this punctuation as well. Using quotation marks for dialogues. A conversation between two or more people is called a dialogue, as you know. When writing a dialogue, begin a new paragraph with each change of speaker. تکرارش میکنم. Using quotation marks for dialogue. A conversation between two or more people is called a dialogue. When writing a dialogue, begin a new paragraph with each change of speaker. Use quotation marks to set up direct quotations. For quotations longer than a paragraph, put quotation marks at the beginning of each paragraph and at the end of the final paragraph. For example, here, at the school assembly, the principal announced, quotation mark, we will blah, blah, blah. So next one, why not Mr. Thompson? Ask another one. So we move to other people in the dialogue and we use the quotation marks. Using quotation marks for titles. Quotation marks are used around titles for the following works: short stories, book chapters, short poems, essays, articles, written works that are part of a larger collection, television episodes, songs, and parts of long musical composition. The titles of longer works such as books, television series, movies, and albums or CDs are printed in italics or are underlined. For example, here, as you see, a spin-off of a popular television show is called The Mouse Catcher. So here also it is italicized. Using underlining and italics. Underlining, as you see here, it is underlined, and italic it's a bit it's not straight. Italics are used to make titles stand out in writing. Use underlining in handwritten work. Use italics in printed materials. Underline or italicize the following titles of books, newspapers, plays, long poems, magazines, movies, television, and radio series, long works of music, and works of art. Underline or underline or italicize words, letters, or numbers used as names for themselves. Also underline or italicize foreign words not yet accepted into English and the names of air, sea, and spacecraft. For example, here, as you see, when you look at it easily, you can understand that this part is italicized, or here I is italicized, or here you see this word, these two words are italicized. So by looking at it, you can understand. Using quotation marks to indicate sarcasm and irony. Quotation marks are used to set up words intended as sarcasm or irony. For example, my kind and thoughtful brother stranded me at the movie theater to go hang out with his friends. So here it's not a normal, and I understand that his brother was not kind or thoughtful. So to just show sarcasm and irony, you can use it. Using hyphens in numbers. Hyphens are used to join compound numbers and fractions. For example, here, use hyphens for two-word numbers from 21, as you see here, this is the hyphen, to 99, it is the hyphen. For example, my grandfather turned 80 hyphen 1 years old, blah, blah, blah. And use hyphens in fractions used as adjective. For example, I used 1/3 cup, 1/3, 1 hyphen third. It is the fraction as an adjective. Use hyphens between a number and a word used as a modifier. For example, 60 minute. This is a modifier for bike ride. So 60 hyphen minute bike ride. Use hyphens for repeated modifiers. For example, the 11th and 12th. Great. So 11th and 12th, these are repeated modifiers. So we have hyphens. Using hyphens with prefixes and suffixes. Hyphens are used to help readers see the parts of a long word. Use a hyphen after a prefix that is followed by a proper noun or a proper adjective. Use a hyphen in words with the prefixes all, ex, and self, and words with the suffix elect. For example, here we have post hyphen Shakespeare, self hyphen confidence, president hyphen elect. Using hyphens with compound words. Use a hyphen to connect two or more words that are used as one compound word, unless your dictionary gives a different spelling, so always check your dictionary. Use a hyphen to connect a compound modifier that appears before a noun. The exceptions to this rule include adverbs ending in ly, and compound proper adjectives or compound proper nouns that are acting as an adjective. When compound modifiers follow a noun, they generally do not require the use of a hyphen. For example, here we have 10-year-old girl, 10 hyphen year hyphen old girl. So 10-year-old has the role of an adjective modifier for girl. But here widely, because here we have ly, widely available information, so we don't need a hyphen here. Well-made pair of jeans, again well hyphen made, but here the jeans are well made, we don't need a hyphen here. Using hyphens for clarity. Some words or group of words can be misread if a hyphen is not used. Use a hyphen within a word when a combination of letters might otherwise be confusing. Prefixes such as semi, anti, or anti, semi, de, and re are usually hyphenated when the root word begins with the same vowel. For example, here, special delivery, as you see, co-opt. So we hyphenate them to make it easier for the reader to understand and read them. Using hyphens at the ends of lines. Sometimes long words at the end of a line of print are hyphenated, with part of the word appearing on the next line. This keeps the line lengths even, making the text easier to read. If a word must be divided, always divide it between syllables. Always place the hyphen at the end of the first line, not at the beginning of the second line. Do not hyphenate single syllable words. For example, here, we finish this sentence, this is the end of the line, so we use a hyphen here, not the next line. And fundraiser, we just separated it between the syllables. Using hyphens correctly to divide words. When using hyphens to divide words, keep the following rules in mind. Do not divide one syllable words. For example, judge. It's a one syllable word, so we don't divide it. Do not divide a word so that a single letter or the letters ed stand alone. For example, ready. Ready is the correct one, so we don't just hyphenate it. Avoid dividing proper nouns and proper adjectives. For example, American. We avoid it. Try to just avoid it. Divide a hyphenated word only after the hyphen. For example, and we are going to visit my brother and sister-in-law in Toronto. And yeah, as you see here, we have sister-in-law, which is hyphenated. Using apostrophes to form possessive nouns. Apostrophes are used with nouns to show ownership or possession. For example, here, add an apostrophe and s to form the possessive case of most singular nouns. For example, student's lunch. It's apostrophe s to show the ownership. So lunch is for the student. And only an apostrophe to form the possessive of plural nouns. This was singular, that's why we added apostrophe s. But if it's plural, we just add apostrophe. As you see, after s, we have apostrophe. After s, we have an apostrophe. Add an apostrophe and an s to show the possessive case of plural nouns that do not end in s or es. For example, children, because it's a plural, one child, two children, but it doesn't end in s or es. That's why we add apostrophe, or dear's apostrophe. Add an apostrophe and s to the last word of a compound noun. For example, my brother-in-law's golf club. So it is a compound noun, brother-in-law. So we add it just to the end of it. And use an apostrophe and s to form possessives involving time, amount, or the word's sake. For example, a day's rest, 3 cents worth, for Chris's sake. Using apostrophes with pronouns. Apostrophes are used with pronouns to show ownership or possession. Use an apostrophe and s with indefinite pronouns to show possession. For example, somebody's car, each other's feeling. So it shows that car is for somebody. Do not use an apostrophe with possessive personal pronouns. Their form already shows ownership. So we have here her. So it shows that hockey stick is for her. So you don't need to use any apostrophe or apostrophe s. Be careful not to confuse the contractions whose, who is, it is, and they are with possessive pronouns. For example, whose sweater is this? Whose possessive pronoun? Who's going? The pronunciation is the same, but the second one is who is going. When we speak, the pronunciation is the same. Using apostrophes to form contractions. Contractions are used in informal speech and writing. Use an apostrophe in a contraction to show the position of the missing letter or letters. For example, here we have an apostrophe here. It shows that it is the contracted form of did not. That's why we use this apostrophe here. Using apostrophes to create special plurals. Apostrophes can help avoid confusion with the special plurals. Use an apostrophe and s to create a plural form of a letter, numeral, symbol, or word that is used as a name for itself. For example, here, I received 4 A's. So because we have 4, so it should be plural. So to pluralize it, we just add apostrophe s or B's apostrophe. It's a special case. And parentheses Parentheses help you group material within a sentence. Use parentheses to set up information when the material is not essential or when it consists of one or more sentences. If the material in parentheses is a complete sentence, use an initial capital letter and place the end mark inside the parentheses. If the information in the parentheses is a phrase, do not use an initial capital letter or end mark inside the parentheses. For example, here, as you see, we have parentheses. This is extra information. It's not a sentence, so we didn't capitalize, lowercase, and we didn't add anything special here. But the next one, it is also non-essential because it is a complete sentence. We capitalized this one, we capitalized S, and we finished it with a period. Brackets. Brackets are used to enclose a word or phrase added by a writer to the words of another writer. Use brackets to enclose words you insert in quotations when quoting someone else. Note that the Latin expression sic, meaning thus, is sometimes enclosed in brackets to show that the author of the quoted material has misspelled a word or phrase. For example, here, a universal language. So language is misspelled, so we use the brackets sic to show that it is misspelled. And then here we have also brackets to show that it is our words or the writer's words. Using the ellipsis, an ellipsis, as you see, 3 dots, shows where words have been omitted from a quoted passage. It can also mark a pause or interruption in dialogue. For example, use an ellipsis to show omitted words in a quotation. For example, here, it was probably a long quotation, so we omitted some parts. That's why we put ellipsis here. And use an ellipsis to mark a pause in a dialogue. For example, okay, kids, ready, set, go. So to show the pause in a dialogue. Dashes. A dash signals a stronger, more sudden interruption in thought or a speech than commas or parentheses. A dash may also take the place of certain words before an explanation. Use a dash to indicate an abrupt change of thought, a dramatic interrupting idea, or a summary statement. Here, you actually believed her, dash, which is longer than the hyphen. This is hyphen, this is dash. So dash is longer than a hyphen. I told you never to believe a word she says when she told you she went skiing. Again here, if you delete it, you actually believed her when she told you she went skydiving. Again, the meaning is clear. So it is also extra information to the sentence. Use a dash to set up a non-essential appositive or a modifier when it is long, already punctuated, or especially dramatic. For example, here again, we can just remove it. The car salesman simply walked out of the showroom. Again, it's non-essential, that's why we use dashes, like parentheses. Use a dash to set up a parenthetical expression when it is long, already punctuated, or especially dramatic. Again, the same scenario, what an experience. Here also we have exclamation mark, and then we have also dashes. It adds variety to your writing. Slashes. A slash is used to separate numbers in dates and fractions, lines of quoted poetry, or options. Slashes are also used to separate parts of a web address. For example, here you can see dates, we use slash, fraction, 2/3, and also line of quoted poetry. It means it's a next line. So instead of next line, to show that it's next line, you can use a slash. And options, for example, oatmeal, eggs, toast, here we have 3 options, so you can use one of them. And web addresses, also we have a slash. All right, thank you so much for watching this video. I'm sure that you've learned a lot. I'm certain about it. Try to watch this video as many times as you like, okay, because it doesn't end here. Every time that you watch it, it helps you improve your writing and definitely your SAT score, because all these grammar rules, details will help you answer the questions in the SAT or any other international exams, such as the TOEFL, IELTS, and so on. So I hope it's helped you, and just subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Please subscribe and like this video, share it with your friends. Sharing is caring, and then it motivates me to record more and more videos with better quality. All right, take lots of care. Hope to see you again.